The desperate panting of Zara Goodwin echoed through the dense forest as she stumbled over gnarled roots and dodged low-hanging branches, her once pristine blue dress now torn and mudded from her frantic escape. Behind her, the thundering hoofbeats of her pursuers grew closer, the two outlaws shouting obscenities that carried on the wind like poison. It was 1878 in the Washington Territory, a time when the law was still struggling to establish itself in the expanding western frontier. Zara had never imagined she would find herself fleeing for her life through the wooded outskirts of Spokane Falls. Just hours earlier, she had been on the eastbound stagecoach, her hopes set on reaching her aunt's home after the death of her parents had left her with nowhere else to turn. The stagecoach robbery should have been routine valuables handed over, passengers left frightened but unharmed. That was until one of the bandits recognized her as the daughter of Judge Harold Goodwin, the man who had sentenced his brother to hang 3 years prior. The hatred in his eyes told Zara everything she needed to know. These men would not be satisfied with merely robbing her. When the stagecoach had slowed to navigate a particularly treacherous bend in the road, Zara had seized her opportunity, flinging herself from the carriage and into the thick wilderness. It had taken the outlaws precious minutes to realize she had escaped, minutes that had given her a head start but not enough of one. "You can't run forever, little Goodwin," one of the men yelled, his voice carrying through the trees. "Your daddy ain't here to hide behind now." Zara's lungs burned as she pushed herself harder, knowing that slowing meant certain death or worse. The forest floor sloped downward, and she lost her footing on a patch of loose earth. Her body tumbled down the incline, branches tearing at her skin and clothes until she came to rest at the bottom of a small ravine. Pain shot through her ankle as she tried to stand. "Help!" she screamed, abandoning any pretense of stealth. "Someone please help me." The sound of approaching horses spurred her into motion again. Limping heavily, she forced herself forward, tears streaming down her dirt-stained face. The woods were growing sparser now, giving way to meadowland. With nowhere to hide, Zara felt despair closing in around her as surely as her pursuers. "Help!" she cried again, her voice breaking with exhaustion and fear. Miles Norton pulled his hat lower over his eyes as the afternoon sun beat down mercilessly on the open field where his cattle grazed. At 26, he had already carved out a respectable small ranch for himself just outside of Spokane Falls. Hard work and a stubborn refusal to quit had turned what was once an abandoned homestead into a promising operation. He had been mending a section of fence when he heard a woman's scream cutting through the usual chorus of birdsong and cattle lowing. Miles straightened, his hand instinctively moving to the revolver at his hip as he scanned the tree line at the edge of his property. Another cry, more desperate than the first, spurred him into action. He whistled sharply, bringing his chestnut stallion, Thunder, galloping from where he had been grazing nearby. In one fluid motion, Miles was in the saddle, urging the horse toward the source of the distress call. As he approached the edge of the woods, he spotted her, a young woman with wild auburn hair, stumbling from the tree line, repeatedly glancing over her shoulder in terror. Behind her, 2 riders emerged from the forest, their faces obscured by bandanas, their intentions clear in the predatory way they pursued her. Miles recognized the shorter of the 2 men immediately, Roy Blackwell, a notorious outlaw whose gang had been terrorizing stage coaches and small settlements throughout the territory. The law had been after him for months, but the wily criminal had always managed to stay one step ahead of the marshals. Without hesitation, Miles urged Thunder forward, cutting across the field at a full gallop. He drew his revolver as he rode, positioning himself between the fleeing woman and her pursuers. "That's far enough," Miles called out, his voice carrying the authority of a man defending his land. The 2 riders pulled up short, clearly surprised by his sudden appearance. The woman turned toward the sound of his voice, hope and disbelief warring on her face. "This ain't your concern, rancher," Roy called back, his hand hovering near his holstered weapon. "The girl's ours. Best ride away if you want to see tomorrow." Miles steadied Thunder with a gentle touch, keeping his revolver trained on the Outlaws. I'd say a woman being chased across my land by two sorry excuses for men makes it my concern. She's under my protection now. The woman had stopped running, her chest heaving with exertion as she looked between Miles and her pursuers, uncertain whether to trust this stranger on horseback. "You don't know who you're dealing with," the taller outlaw warned, shifting in his saddle. "I know exactly who I'm dealing with, Roy Blackwell," Miles replied calmly. "And I know there's a reward on your head that would buy me a new barn, so unless you're fixing to die today, I suggest you turn around and ride away from here." A tense silence fell over the meadow. Miles could see the calculations happening behind Roy's eyes, weighing the odds, considering how fast he could draw. The other outlaw looked less certain, his gaze darting between his partner and the steady barrel of Miles's gun. "This ain't over," Roy finally snarled, slowly backing his horse away. "You watch your back, cowboy, and you," he pointed at the woman, "we'll be seeing you again." Miles maintained his position, revolver unwavering, until the two men had disappeared back into the forest. Only then did he holster his weapon and turn his attention to the woman, who had sunk to her knees in exhaustion and relief. He dismounted and approached her carefully, not wanting to frighten her further. Up close, he could see she was young, perhaps 20 or 21, with striking green eyes that stood out against her dirt-smudged face. "Are you hurt, miss?" he asked, crouching down to her level. "My ankle," she managed between gulps of air. "I think I twisted it when I fell, and thank you." "I thought they were going to kill me." "Miles Norton," he introduced himself, offering his hand. "And those men might still try, which means we shouldn't linger here." "Zara Goodwin," she replied, taking his hand. Her grip was surprisingly firm despite her ordeal. "I was on the northbound stagecoach when they robbed it. They recognized me. My father was a judge who sentenced one of their gang members." Miles nodded grimly. "That explains their determination. Roy Blackwell holds grudges like most men hold gold." He gestured toward Thunder. "My ranch house isn't far. You'll be safer there while we figure out what to do." Zara hesitated, glancing at the imposing stallion. "I've never ridden a horse that large before." "Don't worry," Miles assured her, a hint of a smile softening his weathered features. "Thunder looks mean, but he's gentle as a lamb with ladies. I'll help you up." With careful movements, he supported her as she limped to the horse. When it became clear that her injured ankle would make mounting difficult, Miles placed his hands at her waist. "May I?" he asked. At her nod, he lifted her effortlessly onto Thunder's back before swinging up behind her. Zara tensed momentarily at the unfamiliar proximity, but the alternative, facing the outlaws alone, was far more frightening than sharing a saddle with this stranger who had risked his life for her. "Hold on," Miles instructed as he reached around her for the reins, creating a protective circle with his arms. As Thunder carried them across the sun-drenched meadow toward a distant farmhouse, Zara found herself drawing her first full breath since the stagecoach robbery. She was far from safe, but for this moment, cradled within the strong arms of this unexpected guardian, she allowed herself to believe she might survive this day after all. The Norton Ranch came into view as they crested a small hill, a modest but well-maintained homestead with a main house built of sturdy logs, a barn, and several fenced pastures where cattle grazed lazily in the afternoon sun. Smoke curled invitingly from the stone chimney, and a large dog bounded toward them, barking excitedly at their approach. "That's just Rusty," Miles explained as he felt Zara tense against him. "He's louder than he is dangerous." As they approached the house, a weathered man in his 60s emerged from the barn, his face creasing with concern when he spotted the extra rider. "Isaac," Miles called out as he reined Thunder to a stop, "we've got trouble." Isaac hurried over, his experienced eyes quickly taking in Zara's disheveled appearance and the protective way Miles positioned himself. "Blackwell gang," he guessed, immediately grasping the situation. Miles nodded grimly as he dismounted, then reached up to help Zara down. She winced when her injured ankle touched the ground, and Miles smoothly adjusted his grip to support more of her weight. "Miss Goodwin was on the stagecoach they hit today," Miles explained. They took a special interest in her on account of her father being the judge who sent one of their own to the gallows. Isaac's expression darkened. They'll be back then, with more men. That's my thinking too, Miles agreed. He turned to Zara. This is Isaac Thornton. He helped raise me after my parents passed, and he's the best shot in 3 counties, despite what his aging eyes might tell you. Isaac gave a short nod of acknowledgement. Let's get the lady inside and tend to that ankle, then we can figure out our next move. Miles guided Zara toward the house, his strong arm around her waist providing steady support as she limped alongside him. The interior of the ranch house was simple but comfortable, a large main room with a stone fireplace, solid wooden furniture, and shelves lined with books that suggested Miles Norton was more than just a cattle rancher. Sit here, Miles directed, helping Zara into a cushioned chair near the fire. Isaac, could you fetch some clean water and bandages? As Isaac moved to gather the supplies, Miles carefully removed Zara's mud-caked boot and torn stocking. His touch was surprisingly gentle for hands so clearly accustomed to hard labor. It's swollen but doesn't look broken, he assessed, examining her ankle with professional detachment. You're lucky. A broken ankle out in those woods with those men after you? He didn't finish the thought. Zara shivered despite the warmth of the fire. They killed the driver, she said quietly. Shot him when he tried to protect an elderly passenger. I've never seen such. She trailed off, the horrors of the day catching up with her as the initial surge of survival adrenaline began to fade. Miles looked up from her ankle, his blue eyes meeting hers with understanding. You're safe now, he assured her, though they both knew it was only temporary. Once we've tended to your injury, you can rest, then we'll need to figure out how to get you safely to wherever you were headed. I was going to my aunt's place near Spokane Falls, Zara explained. After my parents died of influenza last winter, she's the only family I have left. I was teaching at a small school in Oregon, but when I received her letter offering me a home, she shrugged slightly. I had nothing keeping me there. Isaac returned with a basin of water, clean cloths and bandages. Miles took them with a nod of thanks and began gently cleaning the dirt and small cuts from Zara's ankle. Your aunt must be worried sick, Miles commented as he worked. The stage would have been due in Spokane Falls by now. She doesn't know exactly when I was arriving, Zara admitted. My last letter said I would be there sometime this week. She's expecting me, but not on any particular day. Miles nodded thoughtfully as he began wrapping her ankle with practiced efficiency. That's something, at least, means Blackwell can't just wait for her to come looking for you. What will they do? Zara asked, her voice smaller than she intended. Miles exchanged a glance with Isaac before answering. If I know Roy Blackwell, he'll gather his gang, probably 4 or 5 more men, and come looking. He's not one to let go of a vendetta, and now I've given him 2 reasons to come calling. I'm sorry, Zara whispered, guilt washing over her. I've brought this danger to your door. Don't apologize for surviving, Miles said firmly, securing the bandage. You did what you had to do, and so did I. Now we just need to stay a step ahead of them. Isaac, who had been silently watching their exchange, spoke up. Town's not safe for her. Sheriff Collins is a good man, but his jail isn't built to withstand a determined gang, and with half the men off at the logging camps. Miles nodded in agreement. We need to get word to the federal marshal in Coeur d'Alene. He's been after Blackwell's gang for months. That's a 2-day ride, Isaac pointed out. I know. Miles stood, his decision made. I'll leave at first light. Isaac, you'll need to stay here with Miss Goodwin. The ranch is defensible, and with her ankle, moving her again so soon would be risky. Zara looked between the 2 men, overwhelmed by their immediate assumption of responsibility for her safety. I can't ask you to do this, she protested. You've already risked enough for a stranger. Miles smiled then, a genuine expression that transformed his serious face and crinkled the corners of his eyes. Miss Goodwin, out here, we don't leave people to the wolves or to men like Roy Blackwell. Besides, he added with a hint of humor, what kind of story would that make? Local rancher saves woman from outlaws only to send her limping back into danger. My mother raised me better than that. The mention of his mother brought a flicker of curiosity to Zara's tired eyes. Your parents? Isaac said they passed. A shadow crossed Miles's face. 15 years ago now. Fever took them both within days of each other. I was 11. Isaac was our nearest neighbor and my father's closest friend. He took me in, taught me everything I know about ranching and a few things I probably shouldn't know about playing cards. Isaac chuckled softly. Your father would have haunted me if I'd let you grow up not knowing how to spot a cheat. The easy rapport between the two men spoke of years of shared hardship and loyalty. Zara found herself envying their obvious bond since her parents' deaths. She had felt adrift in the world, connected to no one. Now, Miles continued, all business again. You need to rest that ankle and recover your strength. Tomorrow could be a long day. I'll make up a bed for you in the spare room. As he moved toward a door off the main room, Zara called after him. Mr. Norton. When he turned, she continued, thank you, not just for saving me, but for treating me like a person worth saving. Something flickered in Miles's eyes, surprise, perhaps, or recognition of a kindred spirit who understood what it meant to be alone in the world. Miss Goodwin, I have a feeling you'd have found a way to save yourself if I hadn't come along, but I'm glad I did. With that, he disappeared into the other room, leaving Zara with the first genuine sense of security she had felt since the stagecoach had rolled out of Oregon a week earlier. As night fell over the Norton ranch, Zara sat at the worn oak table, a bowl of hearty venison stew in front of her. She had washed up as best she could with the basin of water Miles had provided, and Isaac had found her one of Miles's shirts to replace her torn dress until it could be mended. The garment was comically large on her frame, but clean and soft from many washings. It's not much, Miles apologized as he set a plate of cornbread on the table. Out here, we eat for sustenance more than pleasure. It's wonderful, Zara assured him, already taking her second spoonful. The events of the day had left her ravenous, and the rich, flavorful stew was far better than the meager provisions she'd been surviving on during her journey. As they ate, Isaac kept watch by the window, his shotgun propped against the wall within easy reach. The casual vigilance of both men was simultaneously reassuring and nerve-wracking. They clearly took the threat seriously. Tell me about your father, Miles said after they had eaten in silence for several minutes. If we're facing Blackwell because of him, I'd like to know more about the man. Zara set down her spoon, memories washing over her. He was a circuit judge in Oregon for nearly 20 years. Stern but fair, that's what everyone always said about him. He believed in the law when most people out here were still taking justice into their own hands. A rare quality, Miles observed. He made enemies, Zara continued, but he also earned respect. Even men he sentenced would sometimes say he'd treated them fairly. She paused, her fingers tracing the grain of the wooden table. 3 years ago, he presided over a trial for a man named Lee Blackwell. Miles's head snapped up. Roy's younger brother, Zara nodded. Illy had murdered a shopkeeper and his wife during a robbery gone wrong. There were witnesses, evidence, a clear case. My father had no choice but to sentence him to hang. She shuddered slightly at the memory. Roy was in the courtroom when the sentence was read. He stood up and swore that my father would regret the day he condemned his brother. The marshals dragged him out, but my father took the threat seriously. We moved to another district after that, and Roy never forgot, Miles concluded grimly. Until today, I thought perhaps he had, Zara admitted, or that he would never find us. After my parents died, I didn't think anyone would connect me to Judge Goodwin anymore. Small world out here, Isaac commented from his post by the window. News travels, and men like Blackwell have long memories and friends in low places. Miles nodded in agreement. What does your aunt do in Spokane Falls? He asked, changing the subject. She runs a small boarding house, Zara explained. She wrote that she could use my help and that there's demand for a teacher in the growing town. A small smile touched her lips. I've always loved teaching. The children in my school in Oregon were wonderful, eager to learn despite having so little. You'll find plenty of children in need of education in Spokane Falls, Miles said. It's growing faster than anyone expected. What started as a small settlement around the falls has turned into a proper town almost overnight. You've been there recently? Zara asked. Miles nodded. I sell cattle to the butcher there every month or so. It's changed even in the 3 years I've been running this ranch. The railroad's coming soon too, they say. Progress, Isaac grunted, not sounding entirely convinced of its merit. The conversation lulled as Miles began clearing the dishes. Zara found herself studying him when he wasn't looking, the confident way he moved, the thoughtfulness in his expressions. For a man who lived such an isolated existence, he possessed a surprising gentleness and consideration in his interactions. I should check on Thunder and the other horses, Miles announced, reaching for his hat. Isaac, keep Miss Goodwin company while I'm out. I've been meaning to ask, Zara said before he could leave. How did you come to be a rancher? You seem… Well, forgive me for saying so, but you seem educated for someone who chose such a solitary life. Miles paused at the door, a half-smile playing at his lips. My mother was a schoolteacher before she married my father. She made sure I knew Shakespeare as well as I knew how to rope a steer. He gestured toward the bookshelves. Reading keeps the mind sharp during the long winters. As for choosing this life, he glanced around the modest cabin. The land speaks to some people. It called to my father, and it calls to me. With that philosophical statement hanging in the air, he stepped outside, leaving Zara to contemplate the complexity of the man who had saved her life. He doesn't tell most people about his education, Isaac commented, moving from the window to take the seat across from her. Most folks around here look at book learning with suspicion. Why tell me then? Zara wondered aloud. Isaac studied her for a long moment. Perhaps because you're the first person he's met in a long time who might understand that a man can love both books and open country. Outside, the last light of day was fading from the sky. Zara felt the weight of exhaustion pressing down on her, the day's terror and exertion finally taking their toll. You should rest, Isaac suggested, noting her drooping eyelids. Tomorrow will come early, and who knows what it will bring. As if his words had summoned it, the sound of a horse approaching at speed cut through the evening quiet. Isaac was on his feet instantly, shotgun in hand as he moved to the window. It's Daniel, he reported, relief evident in his voice, Miles's nearest neighbor to the east. The door burst open a moment later, and Miles re-entered with a young man close behind him. The newcomer was breathing hard, his expression grim. Miss Goodwin, this is Daniel Hayes, Miles introduced briefly before turning back to the young rancher. Tell Isaac what you just told me. Blackwell's gathered his gang, Daniel reported without preamble. 6 men total. They're asking questions all over the area, looking for a young woman and the rancher who interfered with their business. They're offering gold for information. Isaac cursed under his breath. That was fast. They were camped not far from where they hit the stagecoach, Daniel continued. My brother was hunting and overheard them. They're planning to strike at first light, figuring you'll try to move Miss Goodwin to town then. Miles's face hardened. They've guessed our plan. He turned to Zara, who had gone pale at this news. Change of plans. We can't wait until morning. We need to leave tonight. But the marshal, Zara began. We can't reach the marshal in time, Miles cut in. Our only option now is to get you somewhere safe, somewhere they wouldn't think to look for you. The old mining cabin, Isaac suggested. Up in the hills, it's defensible, hidden, and no one's used it in years. Miles nodded in agreement. It's our best chance. Daniel, I need you to ride to Sheriff Collins in Spokane Falls. Tell him what's happening and that we need the federal marshal from Coeur d'Alene as soon as possible. Daniel nodded, already backing toward the door. I'll leave now. The moon's bright enough to make good time. As Daniel departed, Miles turned to Isaac. You should stay here. Make it look like we're still all here, banking the fire, leaving lights on. Buy us as much time as possible. Isaac nodded grimly. And if Blackwell and his men arrive before help comes? You do what you need to do, Miles answered, the unspoken understanding passing between them. But don't be a hero, old man. This house isn't worth dying for. It's not the house I'd be protecting, Isaac retorted. Now go, get ready. You've got maybe an hour before the moon rises enough to make travel safe. As Miles helped Zara to her feet, she felt a cold dread settling in her stomach. Men were risking their lives for her good men who had nothing to gain and everything to lose by standing between her and Roy Blackwell's vengeance. "I can't let you do this," she protested weakly. "Maybe if I just went to them, explained that my father was only following the law, Miss Goodwin," Miles interrupted, his hands firm but gentle on her shoulders. "Men like Roy Blackwell don't want explanations. They want blood. And I didn't save you from them today just to hand you over tonight." "Now can you ride?" The directness of the question caught her off guard. Yes, though not well. We had a pony when I was younger." "Good enough. We'll fix your dress as best we can, pack some provisions, and be off within the hour." The mining cabin is about 3 hours' ride from here, longer in the dark. As Miles moved with efficient purpose around the cabin, gathering supplies and ammunition, Zara sank back into her chair, the reality of their situation crashing over her. This morning, she had been a hopeful young woman journeying to a new beginning. Now, she was the cause of an imminent confrontation between hardened criminals and the innocent men who had shown her kindness. Isaac seemed to read her thoughts. He sat down beside her, his weathered hand covering hers in a paternal gesture. "Don't carry guilt that isn't yours to bear, young lady. Blackwell made his choice long before you crossed his path, and Miles." He glanced at his adopted son, who was checking the action on his rifle. "Miles has been waiting for something to fight for that matters more than cattle and land. Something tells me he's found it." The implications of Isaac's words sent an unexpected warmth through Zara's chest, momentarily displacing her fear. She watched Miles move about the cabin, his movements decisive and controlled despite the pressure of their situation. In the flickering lamplight, she could see not just the strength in him, but also a depth of character that seemed rare in this wild territory. Perhaps, she thought, if they survived this night, she might have the chance to discover just how deep that character ran. The moon cast long, silver shadows across the land as Miles and Zara made their way through the rolling hills east of the ranch. They rode side by side, Miles on Thunder and Zara on a steady mare named Willow. Her ankle throbbed dully with each movement of the horse, but the bandage Miles had applied provided enough support to make it bearable. They had departed an hour earlier. After hasty preparations, Isaac had helped mend her dress enough for riding. Miles had packed saddlebags with provisions and ammunition, and both men had given her quick instructions on how to handle Willow. Zara had changed back into her repaired dress, though she had kept Miles's shirt, now rolled up in her saddlebag as her only spare garment. The landscape was eerily beautiful in the moonlight, the familiar turned strange and otherworldly under its pale glow. They kept to the valleys when possible, using the natural contours of the land to shield their movement from any distant observers. "How much further?" Zara asked quietly when they paused at a stream to water the horses. "Another hour, maybe more," Miles replied, scanning the ridgeline above them. "The cabin sits in a small box canyon. It's easy to defend only one way in or out, but that also means we'll be trapped if they find us." Zara shivered despite the mild night air. "Do you think they will?" Miles considered the question honestly. "Blackwell's a cunning tracker, but he'll be expecting us to head for town. The mining claim is abandoned and forgotten by most folks around here. Our best chance is that he wastes time searching in the wrong direction." He helped Zara remount, his hands strong and steady at her waist. Even through her fear, she was acutely aware of his proximity, of the quiet confidence he exuded that somehow made her feel that everything might turn out all right despite the odds stacked against them. "How did you come to know about an abandoned mining cabin?" she asked as they continued their journey, seeking conversation to distract from her anxiety. "It was my father's claim," Miles explained, his voice soft in the night air. "He tried his luck at mining before he turned to ranching. Never found much gold, but he always said the real treasure was the land itself." A note of wistfulness entered his tone. "He used to take me up there when I was a boy, said every man needed a secret place where he could go to think. And now it's your secret place," Zara observed. "I haven't been there in years," Miles admitted. After my parents died, it was too painful to go back, too many memories. Zara understood all too well the way grief could turn beloved places into painful reminders of what was lost. I'm sorry we're disturbing your sanctuary. Miles glanced at her, his expression softening in the moonlight. Some ghosts need disturbing, he said. Besides, my father would approve of using his cabin to help someone in need. He always said the measure of a man was what he did when doing right was harder than doing nothing. Your father sounds like a wise man, Zara said. Like my own father, he used to tell me that justice isn't about revenge but about restoring balance. Wise indeed, Miles agreed, though I doubt Roy Blackwell would appreciate the distinction. They fell silent as the trail narrowed, forcing them to ride single file with Miles leading the way. The terrain grew steeper, transitioning from rolling grassland to pine-covered slopes. Despite her exhaustion, Zara found herself marveling at the wild beauty surrounding them, the silver-tipped trees, the occasional startled deer bounding away at their approach, the vast canopy of stars overhead. After what felt like both an eternity and no time at all, Miles raised his hand, signaling a halt. They had reached the entrance to a narrow canyon, its walls rising steeply on either side. We're here, he whispered. The cabin is just around that bend. We'll approach quietly, though it should be empty. As they rounded the bend, the small cabin came into view, a simple structure built of logs and stone, nestled against the canyon wall and partially obscured by pine trees. It looked solid despite its age, a testament to the skill of its builder. Miles dismounted first, then helped Zara down, his touch lingering slightly longer than necessary as he ensured her injured ankle was bearing her weight adequately. He tied the horses to a hitching post beside a small stream that ran alongside the cabin. Wait here, he instructed, drawing his revolver. Let me check inside first. Zara nodded, leaning against Willow for support as she watched Miles approach the cabin cautiously. He disappeared inside for a minute that stretched interminably before reappearing in the doorway. It's clear, he called softly, and in better shape than I expected. With his help, Zara limped to the cabin. The interior was simple, one room with a stone fireplace, a rough-hewn table with 2 chairs, a narrow bed frame in the corner, and shelves built into the walls holding dusty mining equipment and supplies. It's not much, Miles apologized as he lit a small oil lamp he had brought in his saddlebag. But it's solid and the chimney still draws well from what I can tell. It's perfect, Zara assured him, sinking gratefully onto one of the chairs. After hours on horseback, her entire body ached and her ankle throbbed persistently. Miles busied himself building a small fire in the fireplace, using the minimal amount of wood necessary to provide warmth without creating smoke that might be visible from a distance. As the flames caught and spread, warm light filled the cabin, chasing away the shadows and bringing a surprising coziness to the rustic space. Let me check your ankle, Miles said once the fire was established. He knelt before her, gently removing her boot and unwrapping the bandage. His touch was clinical but tender as he examined the injury. The swelling's down a bit. That's good. I'll rewrap it, then you should try to get some rest. As he worked, Zara studied his face in the firelight, the strong lines of his jaw, the tiny scar near his right eye, the way his brow furrowed in concentration. He couldn't be much older than her own 21 years, yet there was a maturity in his demeanor that spoke of responsibilities shouldered young. What will happen tomorrow? She asked quietly. Miles secured the fresh bandage before answering. With luck, Daniel will reach the sheriff by dawn and help will be on the way. If Blackwell and his men follow our false trail toward town, we might have a day or more before they realize their mistake. He rose to his feet, avoiding her eyes. If not, well, this position is defensible. I have ammunition, and they'd have to come straight up the canyon. The unspoken implications hung in the air between them. If Blackwell found them here, there would be nowhere to run. Miles would stand and fight and likely die to protect her. I won't let you sacrifice yourself for me, Zara said firmly. Miles finally met her gaze, something unreadable in his eyes. Miss Goodwin, Zara, some decisions aren't yours to make. I brought you here. I'll see you safely out. Before she could argue further, he moved to the bed frame and began spreading a blanket from his saddlebag over it. You should sleep here. I'll keep watch by the door. You need rest too, she pointed out. I'll rest when you're safe in Spokane Falls with your aunt, he replied with a finality that brooked no further discussion. Too exhausted to argue, Zara accepted his help moving to the bed. As she settled onto the thin mattress, she caught his hand. Wake me in a few hours, she insisted. You can't stay alert if you don't sleep at all. A hint of a smile touched his lips. Yes, madam, he agreed, though whether he meant to keep the promise was another matter entirely. As Miles moved to take up his position by the door, rifle across his knees, Zara felt an overwhelming surge of emotions: gratitude, fear, and something else she wasn't ready to name that made her heart beat faster when she looked at this man who had risked everything for a stranger. Miles, she called softly. When he turned, she continued, thank you. Not just for saving me, but for treating me like someone worth saving. In the firelight, she thought she saw his expression soften. Get some sleep, Zara. Tomorrow's soon enough to thank me. Despite her intention to stay awake, to remain vigilant alongside him, exhaustion quickly pulled Zara into a deep sleep. The rhythmic sound of Miles's breathing from across the room providing an unexpected comfort in the wilderness night. The first pale light of dawn was filtering through the cabin's single window when Zara awoke with a start. For a disorienting moment, she couldn't place where she was or why her body ached so thoroughly. Then the events of the previous day crashed back into her consciousness, and she sat up quickly, searching the cabin. Miles sat by the door as promised, but his chin had dropped to his chest, his breathing deep and even. Despite his determination to remain vigilant, exhaustion had claimed him sometime in the night. His rifle still rested across his knees, his hand never far from the trigger even in sleep. Zara eased herself from the bed, wincing as her stiff muscles protested the movement. Her ankle felt better, still tender, but the swelling had decreased considerably. She moved quietly across the cabin, not wanting to wake Miles when he so clearly needed the rest. The fire had burned down to embers, and Zara carefully added a small piece of wood from the stack Miles had prepared. As warmth began to spread again, she took the opportunity to examine the cabin more thoroughly in the growing light. What she had taken for random mining equipment on the shelves the night before revealed itself to be a curious mix of practical tools and unexpected treasures: a small collection of books, their spines cracked and faded, a carved wooden horse that must have been a child's toy, a woman's hairbrush with a few strands of faded blonde hair still caught in the bristles. These intimate glimpses into the family that had once used this cabin as a retreat touched Zara deeply. She could almost see the young Miles playing with the wooden horse while his mother brushed her hair by firelight and his father read aloud from one of the well-worn books. A soft sound from the doorway made her turn. Miles was awake, watching her with an unreadable expression. I didn't mean to pry, she apologized, quickly stepping away from the shelves. It's all right, he assured her, rising to his feet and stretching subtly. They're just things from another life. They're memories, Zara corrected gently, and clearly precious ones. Miles moved to stand beside her, looking at the items she had been examining. He reached past her to touch the wooden horse, his fingers tracing its smooth curves. My father carved this for my 10th birthday, he said quietly. Said every cowboy needs a good horse, even if it's just a wooden one to practice on. It's beautiful work, Zara observed. He was good with his hands, Miles agreed. Built this cabin, the ranch house, all of it. He glanced at her, a hint of vulnerability in his expression that hadn't been there before. I never brought anyone here, not even Isaac knows I've kept these things. The significance of his admission wasn't lost on Zara. This wasn't just a strategic hiding place, it was a sanctuary for Miles's most precious memories, and he had opened it to her without hesitation. Thank you for sharing it with me, she said softly. Even if the circumstances aren't what either of us would have chosen. A ghost of a smile touched his lips. Strange, isn't it, how danger can bring people together in ways that might never happen in safer times. Before Zara could respond to this philosophical observation, a sound from outside the cabin froze them both, the distant but unmistakable whinny of a horse that wasn't their own. Miles moved instantly, extinguishing the lamp and motioning for Zara to step away from the window. He retrieved his rifle and moved to peer cautiously outside. "Single rider," he reported in a whisper. "Coming up the canyon." Zara's heart hammered in her chest. "Blackwell," Miles shook his head. "Can't tell yet, stay back." He positioned himself beside the door, rifle ready but out of sight from anyone approaching. Zara pressed herself against the wall, her mind racing through terrible possibilities. Had Blackwell found them already? Had something happened to Isaac or Daniel? The sound of hoofbeats grew closer, then stopped. A familiar voice called out, "Miles, you in there, boy?" Relief flooded through Miles's features. "Isaac," he breathed, lowering his rifle and moving quickly to open the door. The older man dismounted stiffly from his horse, his face grave as Miles ushered him inside. He nodded a greeting to Zara before turning to Miles. "Daniel made it to town and back," Isaac reported without preamble. "Sheriff Collins is gathering men, but it'll be midday at least before they can reach us. The marshal from Coeur d'Alene is on his way too, but he won't arrive until tomorrow." "And Blackwell?" Miles asked, the tension returning to his shoulders. "They came to the ranch at dawn, just as Daniel warned," Isaac confirmed grimly. "6 of them, armed to the teeth. When they found only me there, they tore the place apart looking for you too." He paused, a flicker of pain crossing his weathered features. They weren't gentle about their questioning. Only now did Zara notice the bruise forming on Isaac's cheekbone, the split in his lower lip. "Oh, Isaac," she gasped. "I'm so sorry." The older man waved off her concern. "Takes more than a few punches to break an old cowhand." "I fed them the story we planned, that you'd headed for Spokane Falls at midnight. They believed it at first, rode out in that direction." His expression darkened. "But Roy Blackwell, he's cleverer than most. He sent 4 men toward town while he and another rider circled back and picked up your trail." Miles cursed under his breath. "How far behind you are they?" "An hour, maybe less," Isaac estimated. "I took a roundabout route to buy you some time, but they'll figure it out soon enough." Miles paced the small cabin, his mind working rapidly. 2 against 2, he calculated aloud. "Better odds than 6 against 2, at least." 3 against 2, Zara corrected firmly. Both men turned to look at her in surprise. "I can shoot," she explained. "My father insisted I learn. I'm not expert, but I won't cower in the corner while you risk your lives." Miles looked like he wanted to argue, but Isaac's approving nod silenced whatever objection he might have raised. "We'll need every gun," the older man agreed, "and the lady has a right to defend herself." "We need a plan," Miles said, accepting the inevitable. "The canyon gives them only one approach, but it also leaves us with no retreat." "The mining shaft," Isaac suggested, pointing to a dark opening in the back wall of the cabin that Zara hadn't noticed before. "Where does it lead?" "Nowhere useful," Miles replied. "My father abandoned it when the vein played out. It extends maybe 30 yards into the rock, then dead ends." "Still, it's a fallback position if we need it," Isaac noted. "Now let's prepare this place properly." For the next half hour, they worked with focused efficiency, blocking the window with the heavy table, positioning ammunition for easy access, filling every available container with water from the stream. Miles gave Zara his revolver and brief instructions on its use, his expression torn between concern and reluctant admiration when she demonstrated her familiarity with the weapon. "My father believed women should be able to protect themselves," she explained, checking the cylinder as he had shown her. "Especially in places where the law isn't always present." "Your father was a wise man," Miles commented, the respect in his voice evident. "He would have liked you," Zara replied without thinking. When Miles's eyebrows rose slightly, she felt warmth rush to her cheeks. "I mean because you stand up for what's right, even when it's difficult." A silent understanding passed between them, something deeper than words could express in that moment of shared danger. It was Isaac who finally broke the charged atmosphere. "They'll be here soon," he reminded them, checking his shotgun one final time. Miles, you take the window position. I'll cover the door. Zara, stay low and be our second line if they breach either entry. As they took their positions, a heavy silence fell over the cabin. Outside, birds continued their morning songs, oblivious to the human drama about to unfold. The contrast between the peaceful natural world and the violence that threatened to erupt struck Zara as particularly poignant. Miles, she said quietly from her position behind the overturned bed frame. When he turned to look at her, she continued, whatever happens today, I want you to know that meeting you has been. She paused, searching for the right words, an unexpected gift in the midst of chaos. Something shifted in Miles's expression, a softening, a revelation of feelings carefully contained until now. Zara, he began. Isaac's sharp warning cut him off. Riders approaching. Through the narrow gap Miles had left in the window barricade, they could see two men on horseback entering the canyon, moving cautiously, rifles at the ready. Roy Blackwell's distinctive red bandana was visible even at a distance, marking him as clearly as a target. They know we're here, Isaac observed grimly. They're moving too carefully for it to be a coincidence. Let them come closer, Miles instructed, sighting down his rifle. We need to make every shot count. The tension in the cabin was palpable as the riders advanced slowly toward them. Zara's hands trembled slightly on the revolver, but she steadied them through sheer determination. She would not let these men who had shown her such kindness die for her sake without doing everything in her power to help defend them. When the riders were approximately 50 yards from the cabin, they split up, one circling to the right, using the sparse trees for cover while Roy continued a direct approach. They're trying to flank us, Miles observed tensely. I've got the one on the right, Isaac replied, moving to adjust his position. Before either man could take a shot, Roy Blackwell's voice rang out, unnervingly calm in the morning air. Norton, I know you're in there with the Goodwin girl. Come out now and maybe we can work something out. Miles and Isaac exchanged glances but remained silent. No answer. That's not very neighborly, Roy called again, edging his horse closer. Here's my offer, give us the girl and you can walk away. Her father took my brother. Justice demands I take something of hers. An eye for an eye, as they say in the good book. That's not justice, Miles finally responded, his voice carrying easily in the canyon. That's revenge, Blackwell, and you know as well as I do there's no walking away once I hand her over. You'd put a bullet in my back before I took 3 steps. A cold laugh echoed off the canyon walls. Smart man, so it seems we're at an impasse. But I should warn you, my other boys will be joining us soon. They're riding back from town as we speak, so you're just postponing the inevitable. Or maybe Sheriff Collins and his men will get here first, Miles countered. The law's closing in, Roy. This is your last chance to ride away. Always did hate a bluffer, Roy snarled, his pretense of civility evaporating. Kill them all, Jed. The words were barely out of his mouth when gunfire erupted. The second outlaw, now positioned behind a large boulder, opened fire on the cabin. Simultaneously, Roy spurred his horse forward, firing his rifle as he charged. Isaac's shotgun boomed in response, the blast splintering bark from the tree near the hidden outlaw but missing its human target. Miles fired with more precision, his rifle shot catching Roy's horse in the shoulder. The animal screamed and collapsed, throwing its rider heavily to the ground. For a moment the gunfire ceased. Roy had disappeared behind his fallen horse while his companion maintained his position behind the boulder, occasionally firing to keep the cabin's defenders pinned down. Did you hit him? Isaac asked, reloading his shotgun. Just the horse, Miles replied grimly. Roy's still a threat. As if to confirm his assessment, a shot rang out from behind the downed horse, the bullet splintering wood just inches from Miles's head. He ducked instinctively, then returned fire. The exchange continued sporadically for several minutes, shots from the outlaws, carefully measured responses from the cabin. Neither side could gain a clear advantage, but the defenders had the benefit of better cover and position. Zara watched the deadly dance with a mixture of terror and grim determination. She had never witnessed a gunfight, had never imagined herself in such a situation. Yet here she was, revolver in hand, ready to defend these men who had risked everything for her sake. A sudden movement caught her eye. Roy Blackwell was attempting to work his way closer by crawling along the stream bank, using the slight depression for cover. From their positions, neither Miles nor Isaac could see him. "Miles," she called urgently. "The stream. Roy's moving up the stream bed." Miles turned quickly, but not before Roy had reached a position close enough to fire directly through the cabin's doorway. His shot caught Isaac in the upper arm, spinning the older man backward. Isaac's cry of pain galvanized Zara into action. Without conscious thought, she moved from her protected position to the doorway, raised the revolver with both hands as her father had taught her, and fired twice at the outline of Roy Blackwell. The outlaw jerked back, clutching his shoulder, his face contorted with shock that quickly transformed into rage. "You bitch," he snarled, raising his pistol toward Zara. Before he could fire, Miles's rifle cracked and Roy collapsed backward, blood blossoming on his chest. Simultaneously, the second outlaw broke from cover, making a desperate run toward his fallen leader. Isaac, despite his injury, managed to swing his shotgun around and fire. The blast caught the man squarely, throwing him backward onto the ground where he lay motionless. An eerie silence fell over the canyon, broken only by the soft moaning of Roy Blackwell as he lay dying beside the stream. Miles moved quickly to check on Isaac, tearing a strip from his shirt to bind the older man's wound. "Clean through the muscle," Isaac grunted. "I'll live." Only then did Miles turn to Zara, who stood frozen in the doorway, the revolver still clutched in her trembling hands. With gentle firmness, he pried the weapon from her fingers and led her to sit on the overturned bed. "Are you hurt?" he asked, his eyes scanning her for injuries. "No," she managed, though her voice sounded distant to her own ears. Is Roy?" "Dying," Miles confirmed without emotion. "His partner's dead." Zara nodded mechanically, the reality of what had just occurred, what she had just done, beginning to sink in. "I shot a man," she whispered. "You saved Isaac's life," Miles corrected firmly. "And possibly mine. You did what you had to do." Outside, Roy's moaning had stopped. Miles went to check on the outlaw, returning a moment later with a grim nod that confirmed what they already knew. Blackwell was dead. "We should move the bodies," Isaac suggested, wincing as he adjusted the makeshift bandage on his arm, "in case the others come looking." "First, I need to make sure you're properly tended to," Miles insisted, "and then we need to decide our next move." As Miles carefully cleaned and rebandaged Isaac's wound, using supplies from the saddlebags, Zara gradually emerged from her shocked state. The horror of the gunfight remained, but alongside it grew a steely determination. She had survived. They had all survived because they had stood together against those who would harm them. "What now?" she asked when Miles had finished with Isaac's bandage. "We wait," Miles decided. Moving Isaac would be risky, and with his injury, our speed would be compromised anyway. Sheriff Collins and his men should be here within hours. Until then, we defend this position. "What about the other 4 outlaws?" Zara questioned. "That's the gamble," Miles admitted. "If they return before help arrives, we'll face worse odds than before." But they were headed toward Spokane Falls, which is in the opposite direction. With luck, they'll continue their search there for some time before doubling back. The hours that followed were tense but quiet. They took turns watching the canyon entrance, while Miles moved the bodies of Roy and his companion behind the cabin, covering them with canvas from one of the saddlebags. The physical labor seemed to help him process the morning's violence, and when he returned inside, his expression was calmer, more resolved. By mid-afternoon, Zara's nerves were stretched to the breaking point from the constant vigilance and lingering fear. To distract herself, she began asking Isaac about his life before the ranch, about how he had come to be such a close friend of Miles's father. "We came west together as young men," Isaac explained, grateful for the conversation despite his pain. "Had nothing but dreams and the clothes on our backs. Worked the cattle drives, saved our money, learned the land. When John Norton found this valley, he knew it was where he wanted to put down roots. And you? Zara asked. Isaac smiled faintly. I was never one for settling down, preferred the open trail, new horizons. But John had a way of making people want to stay near him. When he married Sarah and they had Miles, well, I found I liked having somewhere to come back to between adventures. Miles, who had been listening quietly from his post by the window, added, Isaac taught me to ride, to shoot, to track. My father taught me ranching and reading. Isaac taught me survival. You had good teachers, Zara observed, looking between the two men who were clearly bonded by something deeper than blood. I did, Miles agreed, his gaze lingering on her face. Though some lessons can't be taught, they have to be lived, like learning what's truly worth fighting for. The intensity in his expression made Zara's heart beat faster. There was something growing between them, something that had taken root in danger and was blooming despite, or perhaps because of the circumstances that had thrown them together. Before she could respond, the sound of multiple horses approaching broke the moment. Miles tensed, rifle ready, while Isaac struggled to his feet despite Zara's protests. Wait, Miles cautioned, peering carefully through the window. A slow smile spread across his face. It's the sheriff, and it looks like he brought half the men in Spokane Falls with him. Relief crashed over Zara in a dizzying wave. She sagged against the wall, unexpected tears springing to her eyes as the full weight of their ordeal and their survival hit her at once. Sheriff Collins, a burly man with a salt and pepper mustache, greeted them with gruff concern, his eyes widening at the sight of Isaac's injury and the news of the two dead outlaws. Daniel told me what happened, he explained as his men secured the area. We rode as hard as we could. The other 4 from Blackwell's gang won't be a problem anymore. We caught them trying to ambush the stage road outside of town. They're locked up tight now, waiting for the federal marshal. As the sheriff's men prepared to transport the bodies and help the survivors back to town, Miles found a moment alone with Zara. They stood by the stream where just hours ago they had fought for their lives, the late afternoon sun casting long shadows across the canyon floor. What happens now? Miles asked quietly, his usual confidence suddenly uncertain. Zara looked up at him, seeing past the rugged exterior to the man beneath, thoughtful, honorable, unexpectedly gentle despite the harsh land that had shaped him. Now I go to my aunt's in Spokane Falls, she replied. As I always planned to do. Seeing the shadow that crossed his face, she added, but perhaps you might call on me there when you come to town for supplies. The hope that kindled in his eyes warmed her more than the sunshine. I might have business in town more frequently than usual, he said, a smile tugging at his lips. Cattle to sell, supplies to buy, a certain school teacher to visit. I would like that, Zara admitted, surprising herself with her boldness. Very much. Miles reached out hesitantly, his hand finding hers. Their fingers intertwined, a simple gesture that nonetheless seemed to contain a promise of possibilities neither had imagined 2 days earlier. It's strange, Miles mused, looking around at the canyon that had been the site of such violence. I avoided this place for years because it held too many memories of what I'd lost. Now it will hold memories of what I might have found. As Zara's hand tightened in his, she realized that what had begun as a desperate flight for survival had somehow, against all odds, opened the door to a future brighter than either of them had dared to imagine. The journey back to Spokane Falls was mercifully uneventful. Sheriff Collins had brought a wagon for those who needed it, and Isaac was made as comfortable as possible among blankets in the bed. Though he protested that he could ride, the blood loss had weakened him more than he cared to admit, and he eventually surrendered to Miles's insistence. Zara rode beside the wagon, her ankle much improved but still tender. The events of the past 2 days had left her physically and emotionally exhausted, yet strangely invigorated. She had discovered strengths within herself she hadn't known existed: the courage to face armed outlaws, the steadiness to fire a weapon when lives depended on it, the resilience to survive when all seemed lost. Throughout the journey, she found her gaze repeatedly drawn to Miles, who rode slightly ahead, occasionally dropping back to check on Isaac or exchange a few quiet words with her. Each time their eyes met, something unspoken passed between them, an understanding, a connection that transcended their brief acquaintance. They reached Spokane Falls as twilight settled over the growing town. The sheriff directed them to the doctor's house first, where Isaac's wound was properly cleaned and bandaged. The bullet had passed cleanly through the muscle without striking bone, and the doctor assured them that with rest and care, Isaac would regain full use of his arm. "Now to find your aunt's boarding house," Miles said when they emerged from the doctor's. The main street of Spokane Falls stretched before them, its storefronts and saloons still bustling with early evening activity. Several curious townsfolk stopped to stare at the bedraggled group, whispers following in their wake as word of the confrontation with Blackwell's gang spread. "It's on Pine Street," Zara recalled from her aunt's letters. "The Blue Spruce boarding house." With directions from a helpful shopkeeper, they made their way through town. The Blue Spruce proved to be a well-maintained two-story structure with a welcoming porch and freshly painted shutters. A sign in the window advertised clean rooms for respectable gentlemen and ladies. Before Zara could knock, the door flew open to reveal a woman in her 40s with the same auburn hair as Zara, though streaked with silver. Her eyes widened in shock as she took in the group on her porch, her niece in a torn and blood-stained dress, a wounded man in the wagon behind her, and the sheriff of Spokane Falls himself. "Zara, good heavens, child, what has happened?" Martha Gibson exclaimed, pulling her niece into a fierce embrace. "It's a long story, Aunt Martha," Zara replied, the emotional strain of the past days finally catching up with her as she returned her aunt's hug. "But I'm safe now, thanks to Mr. Norton and Mr. Thornton." Martha's sharp gaze assessed Miles and the injured Isaac with a mixture of gratitude and suspicion. "Well, don't leave them standing on the porch like unwanted peddlers. Bring them inside this instant. Sheriff Collins, you too, I want to know exactly what has befallen my niece." Over cups of strong coffee and plates of freshly baked biscuits, the story unfolded: the stagecoach robbery, Blackwell's vendetta, Miles's intervention, and the final confrontation at the mining cabin. Martha's expressions ranged from horror to fierce pride as she learned of her niece's courage. "Judge Goodwin would have been proud of you, Zara," she declared when the tale was complete, "though I imagine he would have preferred you arrive without quite so much excitement." She turned to Miles, her expression softening. "And you, Mr. Norton. It seems my family owes you a debt we can never repay." Miles shook his head, uncomfortable with the praise. "Anyone would have done the same." "No," Martha disagreed firmly. "Most men would have looked the other way. It takes a special kind of person to risk everything for a stranger." She rose decisively. "You and Mr. Thornton will stay here tonight, of course. I won't hear of you returning to your ranch until you've had proper rest." Despite Isaac's protests that they would be imposing, Martha was adamant. "I have 2 vacant rooms, clean beds, and a niece who is alive because of you. The least I can offer is shelter for the night." With Isaac settled comfortably in one of the boarding house's best rooms, Miles found himself on the front porch as night fully descended on Spokane Falls. The town sounds piano music from the saloon down the street, distant laughter. The occasional whinny of horses created a tapestry of civilization that seemed almost foreign after the intense isolation of the past day. He heard the door open behind him and turned to find Zara stepping onto the porch. She had bathed and changed into a simple blue dress, her hair freshly brushed and falling in soft waves around her shoulders. The transformation from the bedraggled, desperate woman he'd first encountered to this composed young lady was remarkable. Yet the strength he'd witnessed in her eyes remained unchanged. "Your aunt seems determined to fatten Isaac and me up before allowing us to leave," Miles commented with a small smile. "She's already talking about sending a breakfast large enough for 6 men. "That's Aunt Martha," Zara replied, coming to stand beside him at the porch railing. "She believes most problems in life can be solved with sufficient quantities of good food." She paused, her expression growing more serious. "She's also tremendously grateful to you, as am I." Miles gazed out at the darkened street, finding it easier to speak without meeting those perceptive green eyes. I keep thinking about how differently it could have ended. If I hadn't heard you calling for help, if Isaac hadn't warned us in time, if your shot hadn't thrown Roy off balance. He shook his head. So many small moments that determined whether we lived or died. My father used to say that our lives are shaped not just by the big decisions, but by all the tiny choices that lead us to those crucial moments, Zara said softly. Like your decision to investigate a cry for help rather than minding your own business. Miles turned to face her then, drawn by something in her voice. The moonlight cast her features in silver and shadow, highlighting the delicate curve of her cheek, the determined set of her jaw. I'm glad you found your aunt, he said. She seems like a good woman. She is, Zara agreed, and her boarding house is lovely. She says there's demand for a teacher here, that the town council has been trying to establish a proper school. I might have found my purpose here thanks to you. Miles shifted slightly, suddenly aware of how close they were standing. I meant what I said earlier, about visiting when I come to town. I meant what I said too, Zara replied, her voice barely above a whisper. I would like that very much. The moment stretched between them, filled with unspoken possibilities. Miles had never been a man of many words, preferring action to rhetoric, yet now, when it mattered most, he found himself searching for the right thing to say. Zara, I know we've only known each other for 2 days. It's not enough time to truly know someone, not really. He paused, gathering his courage. But I feel like I've seen something in you that most people take years to reveal: your courage, your determination, your willingness to stand and fight when it would be easier to hide. And I would like the chance to know the rest of you if you're willing. A soft smile curved Zara's lips. I think that's the most words I've heard you speak at once, Miles Norton, he chuckled, some of the tension easing from his shoulders. Isaac would tell you it's probably my yearly quota used up all at once. Then I should make my answer clear, Zara said, her expression growing serious again. Yes, I would like the chance to know you better too. These past days have been terrifying, but they've also shown me what kind of man you are: kind, brave, loyal to those who depend on you. She took a deep breath. Those are rare qualities, especially out here where life can make people hard and selfish. Before Miles could respond, the door opened again, and Martha appeared, her expression apologetic. I'm sorry to interrupt, but Mr. Thornton is asking for you, Miles, something about arrangements for returning to the ranch tomorrow. Miles nodded, reluctant to leave but aware of his responsibilities. Of course, thank you, Mrs. Gibson. As he moved toward the door, Zara's hand caught his, briefly squeezing his fingers before letting go. The simple gesture contained a promise of conversation continued, of possibilities explored, of a connection neither had expected but both now cherished. Later, lying in the unfamiliar comfort of the boarding house bed, Miles found his thoughts continually returning to Zara. The events that had brought them together had been violent and traumatic, yet something beautiful had emerged from the chaos. It was too soon to name the feeling growing in his chest, too soon to imagine a future beyond the next visit to town, and yet he found himself doing exactly that, as sleep finally claimed him, imagining a future where Zara's smile greeted him not just on occasional visits to Spokane Falls, but every day in a home they might someday share. The following morning brought practical matters to the forefront. The federal marshal had arrived from Coeur d'Alene, eager to interview all parties involved in the confrontation with Blackwell's gang. His questions were thorough but respectful, and he seemed genuinely impressed by the courage displayed by Zara and the 2 ranchers. The territory's safer with Roy Blackwell gone, he concluded as he closed his notebook. The remaining gang members will stand trial next month. Given the evidence and eyewitness accounts, I don't anticipate they'll see freedom again in this lifetime. For Zara, the marshal's words brought a complicated mixture of relief and sadness. Justice had been served, but at a terrible cost. Lives had been lost, blood had been shed, and her own hands had contributed to the violence, however justified. Miles seemed to sense her conflicted emotions. As the marshal departed, he found a quiet moment to speak with her in the boarding house's small garden. It's never easy taking a life, he said without preamble, even when there's no choice. Zara nodded, grateful that he understood without her having to explain. I keep seeing his face when my bullet hit him. The shock, the anger, does that feeling ever go away? Not entirely, Miles admitted, but it changes. You learn to live with it, to remember that your actions saved good people from harm. My father once told me that being haunted a little by necessary violence is what keeps us human. Your father sounds like he was very wise, Zara observed. He was, Miles agreed, a wistful smile touching his lips. I think he would have liked you, my mother too. The simple statement touched Zara deeply. I wish I could have known them. A comfortable silence fell between them, broken only by the distant sounds of the awakening town and the cheerful chirping of birds in the garden. Eventually, Miles sighed and straightened his shoulders. Isaac and I should be heading back to the ranch soon, he said. There's cattle to tend to, fences to mend. Life goes on even after days like these. Of course, Zara nodded, trying to mask her disappointment at their imminent departure. Aunt Martha says you're welcome to visit whenever you're in town. And what does her niece say? Miles asked, a hint of his earlier uncertainty returning. Zara found the courage to meet his gaze directly. Her niece says that Spokane Falls isn't so very far from your ranch, and that perhaps when I've settled into teaching, I might like to see that view from your porch that you mentioned. The smile that spread across Miles's face was like sunshine breaking through clouds. I'd like that, he said simply. Very much. Their goodbye was brief but charged with unspoken promise. Isaac, his arm in a sling but his spirit undampened, teased Miles gently about finding excuses to visit town more often. Martha, watching the interaction between her niece and the young rancher with knowing eyes, extended an open invitation for Sunday dinners. As Miles mounted Thunder, preparing to depart, he looked down at Zara standing on the boarding house steps. I'll be back in town next week, he said, to sell cattle to the butcher. I'll be here, Zara replied, her smile conveying all that remained unsaid between them. With a tip of his hat and one last lingering look, Miles turned his horse and rode away, Isaac beside him on a mount borrowed from the livery stable. Zara watched until they disappeared around a corner, a curious mixture of sadness and anticipation filling her heart. Martha's arm slipped around her shoulders. Quite a remarkable young man, her aunt observed casually. Yes, Zara agreed simply, he is. Martha studied her niece's face for a moment, then nodded as if confirming a private theory. Well, come inside, dear. We have much to do if you're to be ready when the town council visits tomorrow to discuss the teaching position. The days that followed passed in a whirlwind of activity as Zara settled into her new life in Spokane Falls. The town council eagerly offered her the position of schoolteacher, impressed by her credentials and even more so by the story of her courage during the Blackwell incident, which had spread throughout the town with the speed only frontier gossip could achieve. Martha's boarding house became Zara's home, a place of warmth and security after her long journey. Her aunt, a widow of 5 years, had built the business from nothing after her husband's death, and Zara admired the older woman's determination and practical wisdom. When Sunday arrived, Zara found herself watching the road from town more often than she cared to admit. Miles had said he would return the following week, yet she couldn't help hoping he might appear sooner. He'll come when he comes, Martha said knowingly as she caught Zara glancing out the window for the 3rd time that morning. Men and cattle wait for no one's convenience. Zara blushed at having her thoughts so easily read. I'm just curious if Isaac's arm is healing well, she deflected poorly. Martha's knowing smile suggested she wasn't fooled. Of course, such concern for an older gentleman's health is only natural. She patted Zara's hand affectionately. Now come help me with these pies. If your Mr. Norton does appear today, we should at least have something proper to feed him. He's not my Mr. Norton, Zara protested, though the idea sent an unexpected warmth through her. Not yet, perhaps, Martha replied with a wink, but I've seen the way he looks at you, dear, and more importantly, I've seen the way you look at him. Before Zara could formulate a response to this observation, A knock at the front door interrupted their conversation. Martha raised an eyebrow as if to say, "I told you so," and went to answer it. It wasn't Miles at the door, however, but a messenger boy with a letter addressed to Zara. She opened it curiously, recognizing neither the handwriting nor the name signed at the bottom. "What is it, dear?" Martha asked, noting her niece's puzzled expression. "It's from someone named Daniel Hayes," Zara explained, scanning the brief message. "Apparently he's Miles's neighbor, the one who warned them about Blackwell's gang." Her expression softened as she continued reading. "He says Miles and Isaac arrived safely at the ranch, but that Miles took a fever the next day. Nothing serious, he believes, but enough to delay Miles's planned trip to town." Martha's face creased with concern. Poor young man, probably the strain of everything catching up with him. The body often waits until the danger has passed before demanding its due. Zara reread the letter, worry gnawing at her. "Daniel says he's caring for both Miles and Isaac, but that Miles asked him to let me know why he wouldn't be coming as planned. That he thought to send word even while ill speaks volumes," Martha observed. "Many men wouldn't have bothered." "I should go to him," Zara decided suddenly. "To them both. They risked everything for me, and now they're alone out there, both injured or ill in some way." Martha considered her niece thoughtfully. It wouldn't be entirely proper, an unmarried young woman visiting a bachelor's ranch. Proper. Zara repeated incredulously. "Aunt Martha, I shot a man to save Miles and Isaac. I think we're well past concerns about propriety." A slow smile spread across her aunt's face. "I was hoping you'd say something like that. I'll pack some food and medicines." "Daniel Hayes can escort you. He's waiting at the general store for your reply." Zara blinked in surprise. "You're not going to try to stop me," Martha snorted softly. "My dear, I've lived on the frontier most of my life. Out here we help those who need it, regardless of what some distant society matrons might think proper. Besides," she added with a twinkle in her eye, "I'll be coming with you, of course." 3 hours later, Zara found herself once again on the trail to Miles's ranch, this time in the relative comfort of Martha's small buggy. Daniel Hayes, a cheerful young man of about 20, rode alongside them, clearly amused by Martha's rapid-fire questions about everything from cattle prices to his marital prospects. The countryside looked dramatically different in peaceful circumstances: rolling hills covered in golden grass, stands of pine trees offering occasional shade, distant mountains framing the horizon. It was beautiful in a wild, untamed way that spoke to something deep in Zara's soul. "There it is," Daniel announced as they crested a hill, pointing to a collection of buildings nestled in a small valley below. Norton Ranch. The approach to the ranch was markedly different from Zara's first arrival. Instead of fleeing for her life on horseback, she now had time to appreciate the careful planning evident in the layout: the house positioned to catch both morning and evening light, the barn and corrals arranged for efficient workflow, the small kitchen garden protected from prevailing winds by a stone wall. As their buggy pulled into the yard, the door to the main house opened, and Isaac emerged, his arm still in a sling but his face lighting up with surprise and pleasure at the unexpected visitors. "Well, I'll be damned, excuse my language, ladies," he amended quickly. "What brings you all the way out here?" "We received word that Miles is unwell," Zara explained as Daniel helped her down from the buggy. "We've brought food and medicines." Isaac's expression softened. "That's mighty kind of you. He's been fighting a fever for 2 days now. Nothing serious the way I see it, just exhaustion catching up with him, but he's too stubborn to rest properly." "That's why we're here," Martha declared, already unpacking baskets from the buggy. "Men are terrible patients. They need firm handling." Isaac's eyebrows rose in amused alarm at Martha's determined tone, but he wisely limited his response to, "Yes, madam," as he led them inside. The interior of the ranch house was much as Zara had imagined from Miles's brief descriptions: simple but comfortable, with solid furniture built for utility rather than show. A bookshelf along one wall held an impressive collection of volumes, while handmade quilts added touches of color to the otherwise practical space. A door at the back of the main room stood partially open, and Isaac led them toward it. He's been drifting in and out of sleep most of the day. The fever broke this morning, but he's still weak as a newborn calf. Zara's heart constricted at the sight that greeted them. Miles lay in a narrow bed, his normally tanned face pale, dark circles shadowing his closed eyes. Despite Isaac's assurances that the worst had passed, he looked alarmingly vulnerable. As if sensing their presence, Miles's eyes fluttered open. Confusion crossed his features before recognition dawned. "Zara," he murmured, his voice rough from disuse. "Am I dreaming?" "Not unless we're sharing the same dream, young man," Martha replied briskly, moving forward to place a hand on his forehead. "Still warm, but much improved, I'd guess. When did you last eat?" Miles blinked at this new voice, his gaze shifting to take in Martha's imposing presence. "Mrs. Gibson." "What we received Daniel's letter," Zara explained, moving closer to the bed. "We were worried about you." A faint smile touched Miles's lips. "You came all this way because I had a fever. We came because you needed help," Zara corrected gently. "Just as you came when I needed help." Something flickered in Miles's eyes, gratitude, perhaps, or deeper emotion he was too weak to disguise. Before he could respond, Martha took charge of the situation with practiced efficiency. "Isaac, show me to the kitchen. I've brought chicken soup that will put strength back in his bones." "Daniel, there's a crate of supplies in the buggy that needs carrying in." "Zara, help Miles sit up so he can drink some water." With Martha's directive sending everyone scurrying to their assigned tasks, Zara found herself alone with Miles. She carefully helped him to a sitting position, supporting his back as she held a cup of water to his lips. "I'm sorry," he said after drinking deeply. "This isn't how I planned our next meeting." "Hush," Zara admonished softly. "You have nothing to apologize for. I'm just glad we came." "You shouldn't be alone when you're ill." "I wasn't alone," Miles protested weakly. "Isaac and Daniel are both wonderful men who have done their best," Zara completed for him, "but neither of them can make chicken soup that can cure the dead as my aunt claims hers can." This drew a small chuckle from Miles, which quickly turned into a cough. Zara supported him through the spasm, her hand rubbing gentle circles on his back. "You shouldn't be here," Miles said when he could speak again. "Not that I'm not grateful, but it's not proper you coming to my bedroom." Zara raised an eyebrow. "I believe we left proper behind when you rescued me from Outlaws and I shot a man to protect you and Isaac." Miles conceded the point with a tilt of his head. "Still, people will talk. Let them," Zara replied with more confidence than she felt. "My aunt is here as chaperone, and in any case, I've never much cared for the opinions of those who would condemn kindness in the name of propriety." A stronger smile spread across Miles's face. "You continue to surprise me, Zara Goodwin." "Good," she replied simply. "Now rest. Aunt Martha will have that soup ready soon, and if you know what's good for you, you'll eat every drop without complaint." Miles settled back against his pillows, his eyes never leaving her face. "Yes, madam," he agreed with mock solemnity. "Though I should warn you, I might be tempted to stay sick longer if it means you'll keep visiting." Zara felt warmth rise to her cheeks at his teasing words, but before she could formulate a suitable reply, Martha bustled in with a steaming bowl of soup, effectively ending their private conversation. The next 3 days established a new rhythm at the Norton Ranch. Martha took command of the kitchen, producing meals that had both Isaac and Daniel singing her praises. Zara divided her time between helping her aunt, tending to Miles as he regained his strength, and exploring the ranch under Isaac's proud guidance. By the 3rd day, Miles was well enough to join them at the table for meals, though Martha insisted he return to bed immediately afterward. His color had improved significantly, and the sparkle had returned to his blue eyes, especially when they followed Zara around the room. On the morning of the 4th day, Zara rose early and slipped outside to watch the sunrise from the front porch. The view was every bit as magnificent as Miles had described: rolling hills bathed in golden light, the distant mountains outlined against the brightening sky. She was so absorbed in the beauty before her that she didn't hear the door open behind her. Miles's voice startled her from her reverie. "It never gets old, does it? that moment when night surrenders to day. Zara turned to find him standing in the doorway, dressed but still looking thinner than when she had first met him. "You shouldn't be up so early," she admonished gently. "Aunt Martha will have both our hides." Miles smiled as he moved to join her at the porch railing. "I'm tired of being treated like an invalid. Besides, I couldn't miss the chance to watch the sunrise with you." They stood in comfortable silence as the last stars faded from the morning sky. Zara was acutely aware of Miles beside her, his steady breathing, the warmth radiating from his body in the cool morning air, the way his hand rested on the railing just inches from her own. "Thank you," Miles said finally, his voice low and sincere. "For coming. For caring enough to make the journey." "You would have done the same for me," Zara replied. "You did do the same, in fact, at much greater risk." Miles turned to face her, his expression serious. "Zara, when I was lying in that bed with the fever drifting between waking and dreams, do you know what kept coming to my mind?" She shook her head, something in his tone making her heart beat faster. "You," he said simply. "Your courage when facing Blackwell's men, your kindness to Isaac. The way you looked in the moonlight on your aunt's porch." He took a deep breath as if gathering courage. "I know it's too soon, we barely know each other, but I can't help feeling that what's growing between us is something rare." Zara found herself nodding, unable to deny the truth in his words. "I feel it too," she admitted softly. "It's unexpected and perhaps unwise, given how little time we've spent together, but wisdom has little to do with matters of the heart," Miles completed when she trailed off. Hesitantly, he reached out to take her hand. "I'm not asking for promises, Zara, just time to see if what we feel now can grow into something lasting." His honesty touched her deeply. There was no artifice to Miles Norton, no games or pretense. Just a straightforward man offering his heart with the same courage he had shown when facing armed outlaws. "I'd like that," Zara replied, her fingers curling around his. "Very much." The sun had fully crested the horizon now, bathing them both in golden light as they stood hand in hand on the porch. In that moment, with the day's possibilities stretching before them, Zara felt a certainty that surprised her. Whatever grew between them, whatever challenges they faced, the connection forged in danger and nurtured in these quiet days would endure. Later that morning, Martha announced that it was time for her and Zara to return to Spokane Falls. "The school term starts in 3 days," she reminded her niece, "and you have preparations to make." Though Zara knew her aunt was right, she felt a surprising reluctance to leave the ranch that had become almost a second home in just a few days. Miles, too, seemed disinclined to part, though he accepted the necessity with grace. "I'll ride into town next week," he promised, as he helped load their belongings into the buggy. "My cattle can't sell themselves after all." Martha, observing their reluctance with knowing eyes, took Isaac aside, ostensibly to give him final instructions about Miles's care, but clearly to afford the young couple a moment of privacy. "I'll hold you to that promise," Zara said when they were relatively alone. "The school is on Maple Street. Perhaps you might stop by after your business is concluded." "Wild horses couldn't keep me away," Miles assured her, his hand finding hers once more. "Zara, these past days, having you here." He struggled to find the words to express what her presence had meant to him. Understanding his unspoken feelings, Zara squeezed his hand gently. "I know," she said simply. "I feel the same." Their goodbye was brief but charged with unspoken emotion. As the buggy pulled away from the ranch, Zara looked back to see Miles standing on the porch, his tall figure silhouetted against the house he had built with such care. Something about the image stayed with her throughout the journey back to Spokane Falls, the solitary man against the backdrop of the wild country that had shaped him, watching as she departed but secure in the knowledge that she would return. The following weeks established a pattern that both Zara and Miles found increasingly precious. True to his word, Miles rode into Spokane Falls the next week, ostensibly to sell cattle but primarily to visit the new schoolteacher who had captured his attention so completely. The one-room schoolhouse on Maple Street, became his regular destination after concluding his business in town. He would arrive as the last students were departing, often bringing small gifts, wildflowers gathered along the trail, a particularly interesting stone found near the stream on his property. Once even a small wooden horse he had carved himself in imitation of the one his father had made for him. For her part, Zara found herself flourishing in her new role. The children of Spokane Falls, ranging from 6 to 16 years old, responded well to her gentle but firm teaching style. Many came from families where education was secondary to survival, but Zara's obvious passion for learning kindled similar enthusiasm in even the most reluctant students. Martha observed the growing relationship between her niece and the young rancher with quiet approval. When Miles began joining them for Sunday dinners, it seemed the most natural progression in the world. Soon, other residents of Spokane Falls grew accustomed to seeing the tall rancher escorting the pretty schoolteacher to church services or community gatherings. As autumn painted the surrounding countryside in vibrant hues of red and gold, Miles's visits became more frequent. The journey from his ranch to town, once undertaken only when necessary, now occurred weekly without fail. Isaac, fully recovered from his wound, often accompanied him, having developed a particular appreciation for Martha Gibson's cooking and forthright conversation. On a crisp October evening, Miles and Zara walked along the banks of the Spokane River after sharing dinner at the boarding house. The falls that gave the town its name roared in the near distance, their powerful cascade catching the last golden rays of sunset. "Isaac tells me you've added another 20 head of cattle to your herd," Zara commented, her arm linked comfortably through Miles's. "News travels fast," Miles observed with a smile. "Yes, I purchased them from a rancher heading back east. Good stock, fair price." He paused, seeming hesitant about his next words. "I've also started building an addition to the house." Zara glanced at him curiously. "Oh, what kind of addition?" "Another bedroom," Miles replied, his gaze fixed on the distant horizon rather than her face. "And a proper sitting room. Isaac says the place is too bachelor plain for visitors." The implication behind his words warmed Zara despite the cooling evening air. Over the past months, their relationship had deepened and strengthened, moving from cautious exploration to something much more profound. They had shared stories of their childhoods, their hopes for the future, their fears and dreams. Each new revelation had only confirmed what both had suspected from the beginning, that they had found in each other something rare and precious. "It sounds lovely," Zara said softly, "though I've always found your home perfectly charming as it is." Miles finally turned to look at her, his expression suddenly vulnerable in a way she rarely saw. "Zara, I'm not good with fancy words or grand gestures. I'm just a man who works the land and tries to do right by those who depend on him. But these past months, getting to know you, being with you, it's changed everything for me." He stopped walking and turned to face her fully, taking both her hands in his. "I know it's only been a few months since that day in the woods. Some might say it's too soon, but I've never been more certain of anything in my life." Zara's heart began to race as she realized what was happening. "Miles, please let me finish before my courage fails me," he requested gently. "Zara Goodwin, I love you. I love your strength and your kindness, your passion for teaching, the way you face challenges without flinching. I want to build a life with you if you'll have me." With that, he reached into his pocket and withdrew a small, simple gold ring. "It was my mother's," he explained. "My father gave it to her when they decided to make their life out here with nothing but dreams and each other to rely on." Tears welled in Zara's eyes as Miles dropped to one knee before her, still holding her hand. "Zara, will you marry me? Will you make my house a home, share my life, whatever challenges and joys may come?" For a moment, Zara could only look down at this man who had saved her life in more ways than one, not just from Blackwell's gang, but from a future without the deep connection she had always longed for but never truly believed she would find. "Yes," she whispered, then more strongly, "Yes, Miles Norton, I will marry you." Joy spread across Miles's face as he slipped the ring onto her finger. It fit as if made for her, a simple band that represented not just their commitment to each other, but a connection to the past and a promise for the future. As he rose to his feet, Zara threw her arms around his neck, propriety forgotten in the emotion of the moment. Miles's arms encircled her waist, drawing her close as their lips met in a kiss that held all the passion and tenderness they had carefully restrained during their courtship. When they finally parted, breathless and smiling, Miles rested his forehead against hers. "I promise to spend every day making sure you never regret saying yes," he vowed softly. "I already know I won't," Zara assured him, her hands framing his face. "When those outlaws chased me through the woods that day, I was running for my life. I had no idea I was actually running toward my future toward you." Miles smiled at her characterization. "Then I'm grateful for Roy Blackwell's stubbornness, as terrible as that sounds. Without his vendetta, our paths might never have crossed." "I believe they would have," Zara contradicted gently. "Perhaps not in such dramatic fashion, but souls meant to find each other always do, one way or another." Hand in hand, they walked back toward the boarding house, where Martha and Isaac waited to hear news that would surprise neither of them but would bring joy to all. The wedding took place on a clear November day, with the surrounding hills dusted in the first light snow of the season. The small church in Spokane Falls was filled to capacity. Zara's students and their families, Martha's boarders and friends, ranchers from the surrounding area who had come to respect Miles, and even Sheriff Collins, who claimed credit for bringing the couple together by arriving just in time to witness the aftermath of their meet cute, as he put it. Martha had insisted on making Zara's wedding dress herself, a creation of ivory silk with delicate lace at the collar and cuffs. As Isaac walked her down the aisle in place of her father, Zara felt a curious blend of nervousness and absolute certainty. When her eyes met Miles's at the altar, his expression of wonder and devotion banished any lingering anxiety. The ceremony was simple but deeply meaningful. They exchanged vows they had written themselves, promises not just of love and fidelity but of partnership, respect, and unwavering support through whatever life might bring. When Miles slipped the gold band onto her finger to join her mother's engagement ring, his hands were steady but his voice caught with emotion. "I now pronounce you husband and wife," the minister declared to the beaming congregation. "Miles, you may kiss your bride." The kiss they shared was brief but tender, a promise of many more to come in the privacy of their shared future. As they turned to face their friends as a married couple, the cheers and applause that filled the small church seemed to Zara like the perfect beginning to their new life together. The celebration afterward at Martha's boarding house was joyous and relaxed. Isaac gave a speech that brought both laughter and tears, recounting how he had known Miles was a goner from the moment he first saw him looking at Zara. Martha added her own toast, welcoming Miles to the family with warmth that moved the normally stoic rancher visibly. As the afternoon waned, Miles and Zara prepared to depart for the ranch, their ranch now. Zara reminded herself with a thrill of excitement and nervousness. Martha hugged her niece fiercely, whispering advice and encouragement that made Zara blush but also calmed her wedding night anxiety. "Be patient with each other," Martha concluded as they said their goodbyes. "Love isn't always easy, but it's always worth fighting for." "We've already proven we can fight together," Miles responded, his arm securely around his new wife's waist. "Now we get to learn how to live together." The journey to the ranch was filled with comfortable conversation and occasional comfortable silences. As they approached the property, Miles reined in their horses, gesturing toward the house in the distance. "Welcome home, Mrs. Norton," he said softly, the new name bringing a smile to Zara's lips. "It looks different somehow," she observed, studying the familiar structure. "That's because it is different," Miles replied mysteriously. "I've been working on a few surprises while you were busy with wedding preparations." As they drew closer, Zara could see what he meant. The front porch had been expanded and now featured a swing large enough for two. Window boxes waited empty but ready for spring planting. Most noticeably, A new addition extended from the eastern side of the house, the extra bedroom and sitting room Miles had mentioned, but larger and more substantial than she had imagined. "Miles, it's wonderful," she breathed as he helped her down from the wagon. "Wait until you see inside," he urged, lifting her effortlessly into his arms before she could protest. "Tradition says I should carry you over the threshold." Zara laughed as she looped her arms around his neck. "Far be it from me to argue with tradition." As Miles carried her across the threshold, Zara gasped in delight. The interior of the house had been transformed. New curtains hung at the windows, a colorful rug brightened the wooden floor, and most surprisingly, a small piano stood in the corner of the newly created sitting room. "How did you?" Zara began, astonished at the instrument's presence so far from town. "Isaac and Daniel helped me haul it out here last week," Miles explained as he set her gently on her feet. "You mentioned once that you played as a girl, that your mother taught you. I thought you might like to play again." Tears welled in Zara's eyes at his thoughtfulness. "It's perfect," she whispered, moving to touch the keys reverently. "All of it is perfect." Miles moved to stand behind her, his arms encircling her waist as she leaned back against his solid strength. "Not quite perfect yet," he murmured against her hair, "but now that you're here it will be." Turning in his embrace, Zara lifted her face to his. "I love you, Miles Norton." "And I love you, Zara Norton," he replied, the new surname sounding right and natural on his lips. "More than I have words to say." As twilight settled over their home, Miles and Zara began the sweet exploration of their new life together, not as schoolteacher and rancher, not as rescuer and rescued, but as husband and wife, partners in whatever adventures lay ahead. Years passed, and the small ranch on the outskirts of Spokane Falls flourished under the care of Miles and Zara Norton. The cattle herd grew, as did their reputation for fair dealing and quality stock. The house expanded again to accommodate their growing family, first with the arrival of John Isaac Norton, named for both Miles's father and the man who had become like a grandfather to their son. And 2 years later, Sarah Martha Norton, bearing the names of both grandmothers she would never meet, but whose legacies lived on in the family stories. Zara continued teaching for several years, eventually establishing a small school right on the ranch property where neighboring children gathered 3 days a week for lessons. Her innovative teaching methods and genuine care for each student's progress earned her the respect of even the most education-skeptical families in the area. Martha eventually sold her boarding house and moved to the ranch as well, building a small cottage nearby where she could maintain her independence while being close to her beloved great-niece and grandnephew, as she called the children. Her practical wisdom and boundless energy made her an invaluable part of ranch operations, particularly when Zara was busy with teaching or when a third Norton child, Robert Daniel, joined the family. Isaac remained a constant presence, officially retiring from ranch work, but unofficially supervising everything from his favorite rocking chair on the porch. The children adored him, gathering around for stories of the early days and begging for yet another retelling of how Mama shot the bad man to save Papa, a tale that grew more elaborate with each passing year, much to Zara's amusement and mild chagrin. On a warm summer evening 15 years after that fateful day in the woods, Miles and Zara sat together on the porch swing, watching their children play in the yard. John, now 14 and the image of his father, was demonstrating his roping skills to 10-year-old Robert, while 12-year-old Sarah sat nearby, her nose buried in a book as usual. "Sometimes I still can't believe this is our life," Zara mused, her head resting comfortably on Miles's shoulder. "When I think of that terrified girl running through the woods, certain she would die. And when I think of that solitary rancher convinced he needed nothing and no one beyond his cattle and his land," Miles added, his arm tightening around her, "we've come a long way." "A blessed way," Zara corrected, smiling up at the man whose face had grown more dear to her with each passing year. The boyish rancher had matured into a man of quiet strength and unwavering integrity, Respected throughout the territory not just for his successful ranch, but for his fairness and generosity to those in need. Miles had aged well, she thought fondly. Silver now threaded his dark hair at the temples, and lines of laughter framed his eyes, but he was still as handsome to her as the day he had ridden to her rescue. "What are you thinking about with that smile?" Miles asked, catching her appreciative gaze. "Just that I'm the luckiest woman in the Washington Territory," she replied honestly. "To have found a man who sees me as I am and loves me anyway." "Not anyway," Miles corrected gently, "because of who you are, not despite it. Your strength, your compassion, your occasionally terrifying determination when you believe you're right." This last was said with a teasing smile that earned him a light swat on the arm. "I'm rarely wrong," Zara protested with mock indignation. "Rarely," Miles agreed diplomatically. "But magnificently so when you are." Their playful banter was interrupted by Sarah, who had abandoned her book and now stood before them, her expression serious in that particular way that suggested a significant question was forthcoming. "Papa, Mama," she began, her hands clasped behind her back in a gesture reminiscent of her father. "Johnny says that if you hadn't rescued Mama from those outlaws, none of us would exist. Is that true?" Miles and Zara exchanged glances, having learned over the years to navigate such questions together. "In a way," Miles acknowledged. "If your mother and I hadn't met that day, our lives would have taken very different paths. But I like to think we would have found each other somehow," Zara added, reaching for her daughter's hand. "The best loves are meant to be, even if the path to finding them isn't always straight or easy." Sarah considered this thoughtfully. "Like in my book, where the princess has to overcome many obstacles before finding her true love." "Something like that," Miles agreed, though Zara knew he had little patience for the romantic novels their daughter devoured. "Only with more cattle and fewer dragons." This drew a giggle from Sarah, who soon ran off to share this new perspective with her brothers. As the children resumed their play, Miles turned to Zara, his expression suddenly reflective. "You ever wonder what might have happened if I hadn't heard you calling that day? If I had been working in another field, or if the wind had carried your voice in a different direction?" Zara considered the question seriously. "Sometimes," she admitted. "But then I look at our children, our home, the life we've built together, and I choose to see not chance but purpose in our meeting. Whatever forces guide this world, God, fate, the interconnected decisions of countless lives, I believe we were meant to find each other." Miles nodded slowly, his gaze taking in their thriving ranch, their healthy children, the peaceful community they had helped build. "I used to think I understood what it meant to have a home," he said quietly. "My father taught me to love the land, to respect it, to build something lasting upon it. But it wasn't until you came into my life that I truly understood home isn't a place at all. It's where love dwells." As the setting sun bathed their world in golden light, Zara leaned up to kiss her husband softly, a gesture still filled with the same tenderness and passion that had marked their relationship from the beginning. From a chance encounter born in fear and danger, had grown a love that sustained them through the challenges and joys of frontier life, a love that would continue to guide them through whatever adventures still awaited on the horizon. In the distance, their children's laughter rang out, a joyful counterpoint to the gentle creaking of the porch swing and the soft murmur of voices as Miles and Zara Norton continued the conversation they had begun 15 years earlier and would carry on for all the days of their lives together.